All right, folks, so we are ready to go. Thanks again for being here. We are recording.
Great. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Murphy. I'm the Director of Creative New Jersey, and it's great to gather with you again this morning. On behalf of my colleagues, Casey O'Brien and Jeanette Mitchell, thanks for being with us once again. We see a lot of familiar faces on the call this morning, and some of you have been with us each week. You know that today's briefing is the fourth in a series of community calls that we're holding regarding the COVID-19 response in our state. So every Wednesday throughout the month of April, and now we've added May, from 10 to 11, we're going to hear updates on statewide response efforts. We want to share news on resources. We know that misinformation in a time of crisis is sort of rampant. So, we're grateful to our guest speakers each week who can help us understand some of the timely and accurate information that's available to us. We recognize that this is just one moment in time in the trajectory of our crisis, and that information does change, but we're, using these calls as a way to help everybody sort of stay aligned with the most accurate and up-to-date information at that point that we gather together on any particular Wednesday. These gatherings, like all of Creative New Jersey's programming, is open to everyone who wants to participate. So, we're grateful today to our friends and colleagues from New Jersey Spotlight, New Jersey Institute of Technology, and Chalkbeat, who have agreed to be on the call this morning to share some information with us on the state of education amidst the pandemic. So just before I introduce our first speaker, John, I want to ask all of us to just bring our attention into the center of our Zoom room, right? You want to take a deep breath, you can take a deep breath. We know all of us are doing these Zoom meetings now pretty regularly. And I know sometimes for myself, my attention can be in lots of different places. Everybody's dealing with a lot of stressors and pressure because of this pandemic. Everybody's affected in different ways, and there's no hierarchy to the pain or the struggle, right? What each of us are experiencing is as valid and important to everybody else. So, in sort of true Creative New Jersey style, let's be present for each other, right? It's an opportunity for us to sort of support each other over the next hour. We're really grateful for the information that John and Angela and Patrick are going to share with us. But as Casey said, just before we had, started recording our call, is that what all of you have to share with us is also equally important. So we want to encourage you to be present for the conversation, because it matters. Like, all of you make this valuable. So thanks for being with us, today and the other weeks, and in the weeks and months to come. So Casey, is there anything that you wanted to say just logistically about the call today before I introduce John?
No, I think when we get to Q&A moments, I'll remind folks what the protocol is for being able to raise your hand and Q&A and phones and all that. So you can go ahead and just move right in.
Great. Thanks, Casey. Okay, so now, it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague, John Mooney. John is the CEO and education writer at NJ Spotlight. And John's gonna share with us his 30,000-foot view of, sort of the state of education right now amidst the pandemic. So John, I think Casey has unmuted you. And I know everybody joins me in welcoming you to the call this morning.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
We can.
Good, great. So I wish it was 30,000 feet, but they don't let me outside. So it's what I think is 30,000 feet from my phone and my computer. Thank you for holding this. This is obviously, I've covered education for what seems forever, and this is certainly as unprecedented as any time I've ever gone through. Not obviously, personally, it's unprecedented, but in terms of what's happened to schools, and I think it could have and will have a lasting effect. I think schools will be a different place when and if we get back there. But let me start on my sense of what's happening now, what has happened over the last month, and what are some of the real challenges that are taking place. And I know Patrick, who's done some great reporting out of Newark, can dive deep into some of those in that city. It has clearly been a very mixed bag. Nobody was ready for this throughout our country, and certainly our schools. They all had emergency plans and all kinds of things in place, but nothing to be ready for not just this occurrence, but how long it's lasted and how long it likely will last. And it's been a very mixed, a mixed picture out there. Some schools were, especially at the high school level, were fairly adept at remote learning, or at least online learning. A lot was going on already. There are countless schools out there that give Chromebooks to every one of their students, and there was a ton of online activity going on. And for them, the transition was a little easier, certainly. And I've heard some great and inspiring stories of how schools adapted and how teachers adapted, to their credit, at all age levels. And a big shout out to the educators out there who've really taken to heart this new challenge in their lives and reinvented themselves. I mean, it really is, to a degree, reinventing schooling, at least for the time being. I do want to give a shameless plug to our media partner, NJTV, which has started, it's called Learning Live. It is a daily show, which I think does 3 or 4 televised lessons for grades 3 through 6. And they bring in teachers, top-notch teachers throughout the state who give lessons from their kitchens and their living rooms to those who may not have other technology, or even those who do have technology. But there's nothing like turning on the TV and watching a lesson. And I think they've been very successful, and a real credit to NJTV for taking on that task, and also for the State Department of Ed and the NJIA, the Teachers Association, for helping underwrite that. And I think it's those kinds of creative things that really do make a difference, and a credit to it. But I've also heard, in even those situations where schools think they have some sense of control and on all this, that there's nothing like being in the classroom, and there's nothing like that contact, not just between student and teacher, between students and students and students and counselors, and every which way. And we're losing a lot of that. It's the old adage, you don't miss it till it's gone. But schools play a much bigger role than, as we all know, than just educating children. And they play a huge role in mental health and nutrition and exercise and all kinds of things. Obviously social skills, and not having that in place, I think, has really, even in the best of situations, has been very difficult. And I think we will pay for that. I think, I think we're resilient, but there'll be some loss from that. And more dire is our schools weren't perfect places before all this happened, in terms of consistency and equity issues and all kinds of matters. And I think in this situation, you're seeing some of those real challenges laid bare. And there are some troubling signs that some kids are getting left behind, or at least not having the same opportunities that other kids have had. And I think that is incumbent on the state as well as the local districts to try to minimize that. I don't think we can ever erase it, but there's certainly big technology challenges. The state early on, at the beginning of this, said there was 100,000 plus kids who didn't have the adequate technology to do remote learning, if we're talking just online learning. Admittedly, there's other ways of teaching remotely, but technology clearly is a predominant one. And 100,000 kids is a lot of kids. That's 1 in 10 students in New Jersey, and I'm guessing that may be undercounted as well. So that is a big challenge. What are the steps? Has that number been updated? Not yet. I'm having a hard time even getting a breakdown of how that actually plays out in individual districts. Patrick can help us with Newark maybe. But you know, what is being done about it? It's one thing to recognize it's a challenge, but what is being done about it? And again, it's anecdotal, and you hear some great things and some extraordinary efforts being made. Camden was able to raise $500,000 from a variety of sources, including Campbell's Soup, to get Chromebooks out to students. But I think just handing them a Chromebook isn't necessarily solving the issue. And is that happening everywhere? And I have a sense it's not. And so that's a big challenge. And what is being lost in the meantime? I mean, we are a month into this, and we can talk more about it, but I'm guessing this is going to be several months going, and I'm not even certain September is going to be happening in terms of returning. The other big worrisome issue, and again, it's more, you know, my gut in covering these issues for a long time, but students with special needs and with disabilities, and how are they being served? You know, that their instruction is anything but remote in the best of times. It's really, you know, it's meant to be one-on-one, hands-on. Some of these children need active tactile therapies and the like. Those are obviously challenges that can't happen anymore, or at least in this current situation. And so how's that working out? And we haven't even talked about the burdens on their families, but also all families that are now, you know, you're now a parent and a teacher. And a counselor and you know, a referee and all the other things that come with being a parent in school per se. So as I said, it's a mixed bag, and I think we're learning a lot from it, hopefully. And I think there will be some lessons going forward as we go back into this. But you know, I look forward to hearing my colleagues speak about how it's affecting where they work and what they cover. But you know, I'm hoping we don't need to have many of these, and that we will be back to relative normal come fall, if not sooner. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate everything that you shared. And, you know, we'll do maybe a few minutes of Q&A with John right now, and then we'll move on to Angela. And, you know, but we'll have time at the end as well after Patrick to do more Q&A. So, you know, Casey will moderate this, but if you've got a question specifically for John, you can put it in the chat box, or you can raise your hand. And Casey, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks again, John.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. So yes, just as a reminder, if you are joining us on video, you want to open your participants section by looking at the menu down at the bottom. Once you open participants, you'll see a little blue icon, hand. If you click that, it'll raise your hand. You can also put questions directly into chat. And then I'll periodically touch base with those who are joining us by phone only to open up stuff there. I do see we've got a question from Maureen. Maureen, if you want to go ahead, I'm going to unmute you right now. Hopefully it's coming. One second, we'll try it one more other way. Or you can unmute yourself if you want to go ahead and do that. For some reason, my computer's not letting me do that. There we go.
Yes, thanks, Casey. Thanks, John. That was great to hear all your insight on this. And I am a teacher, and our district was really not prepared for this. And I'm finding a very uneven response in my remote teaching. I really just wanted to make a comment about it because I find it very disheartening right now. I have Zoom meetings 3 times a week. I post my lessons in Google Classroom. And after the first week, I had a response of 14 students. At the second week, I had a response of 6 kids coming to my classes. And in the third week, I had 1. And so it's very disheartening to have this happen. And I think when I say we weren't prepared, like we didn't send the kids home with Chromebooks. So we have been playing catch up. Now we're trying to do technology surveys. Who has a device, who does not? Even a bigger issue is then who has internet. And where I work, it's an economically disadvantaged area. So, you know, many of the students, this is how uneven it is. Many of the students have a device, they have a phone, most of them, not everybody, but a large amount of them don't have internet. So we're kind of trying to catch up now and make a deal with T-Mobile and do these surveys where we can find out who doesn't have it so we can get them some internet. So it's very uneven as far as the equity issue in our district. And it's just really, it's hard as a teacher right now. I feel like an investment in these kids and I can't reach a lot of them. And I'm worried about those that are slipping through the cracks. I really am. I'm going to have to leave in about 15 minutes because I'm holding my own Zoom meeting at 11 o'clock with the students, but hopefully I'll get a better response today. But the insight was really good to hear from you, and it's very accurate, very spotty. And the more I lose contact with the kids, the more fearful I get for them. I'm very concerned. So just wanted to say thank you for your insight, and I wanted to give you some of mine from the classroom. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly responding, what has worried me is how slowly, not only were a lot of districts not prepared for this, but in some cases, how slowly some, including the state for that matter, are responding to obvious inequities. We're a month out already. There is a chance that this is going to go on for 6 months. And now schools, how are they going to address that? Are schools going to stay in remote instruction through June and then try to do summer school? Or, I just think that there's this term in education called learning loss. And I just think that you're going to have, it could be 6 months before kids are back in school. And that is a long time, longer than any of these kids have ever been away from a school setting and all the supports and protections they provide. So I guess I wish districts and the state itself would move quicker in trying to address these things. And I agree, it's not just Chromebooks, and that's not just the answer. There's a lot of challenges. Those are just some of the more profound ones.
Great. Thanks, John. And thank you, Maureen. As of right now, I'm not seeing any other questions unless we have someone on the phone who wants to ask a question. So if you do, remember it's *6 to unmute yourself, and then go ahead and just speak up. If you do, I'll give it another couple of seconds. And then if we don't have any questions coming from folks on the phones, I think we can move on and introduce our next speaker.
This is Debbie Duncan. I just wanted to respond a little bit to what Maureen was saying too. Is one of the issues we're dealing with. You've got the technology, but you also have the how connected, how do people, families, and students feel that they make a difference? Are they empowered at all? Do they feel that they have support at home for participating in these educational programs? They're used to 5, 6, 7 hours a day, and we don't have the resources to keep them engaged that way. There's so many issues around making this transition so suddenly, but in general, but also I think when you have communities, again, where their resources are limited, people are extremely stressed, it really adds to that whole burden.
Yep. Thanks, Debbie.
Okay.
Oh,
one quick note on that, just that I've heard from folks in child services and children and families, is the worrisome drop in reported cases of domestic violence and abuse. And largely they attribute it, at least some of the experts I've spoken with attribute it to schools not being in place as a safety net for kids and monitoring these things. On one hand, you'd say this is great, the numbers are down, but I think it's more the reporting is down because we don't have teachers, we don't have coaches who are seeing these kids every day. So just a side piece of that, again, it speaks to the role that schools play beyond just teaching kids.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Elizabeth, I'll turn it to you.
Great, thanks, Casey. Thanks again, John, and to Maureen and Debbie for contributing. So now we'd like to introduce our friend and colleague, Angela Garretson. Angela is the Chief External Affairs Officer in the President's Office at New Jersey Institute of Technology. She's also a host team member with us in our Creative Newark Call to Collaboration team. So we're grateful for Angela's partnership there and NJIT's partnership and hosting us for that work. So Angela, you're going to share your perspective with us on what's happening in the higher education world and at NJIT. And so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you now. And I know all of us welcome you to the call today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you so much, Casey. These calls are so critical. As you know, we are on so many calls and hear so many briefings every day. But when I think about transitioning from pre-K through 12 to higher education, it really makes me think about when we used to do fire drills every day. Not every day, but you do fire drills growing up in schools, and you always think you're prepared, but it's just that one situation where you're actually not prepared. But I'm very pleased to say at New Jersey Institute of Technology, your state polytech or STEM institution, although we had a lot of experience in digital learning or online learning, we still were not necessarily prepared for everything that came along with this particular pandemic. So NJIT, we actually launched our task force in January 30th, and we monitored the global outbreak. In response, NJIT took significant steps to reduce the risk for our students, our faculty. We first really started by extending spring break, saying that we wanted to make sure after spring break, the students would be off campus and on a online or remote learning. So we also had to cancel, as you know, all of our university related travel and events, both on and off campus. And we also had to really take the initiative to say if folks were exposed to anyone with COVID, to self-quarantine. These were all new dynamics that all came at us at the same time. This was also during the time during February where the CDC's warnings went from 2 to 3 to ultimately the pandemic. And we had to really raise our concerns of how do we manage a transition from being a campus that's not online to a campus that's remote. So we really started having almost like a timeline. And by March, our NJIT leadership under our president, Joel Bloom, we were able to execute that all our classes were going to be canceled. But of course, all the dates did not remain the same. So we had to move that up almost a week. So we canceled classes March 12th to 14th. And by doing that, we really tried to get our students, our faculty, our staff really prepared for what was ahead. We had to really and also encourage students to return home. This was unheard of. We had to get students who were on campus, off campus. Unheard of. So we really tried to create only our essential employees to remain on campus. But what was key was that we had to remain open. All normal services were provided, including dining services for some of the students who were still there. We had to keep some of our residence halls open and also our administrative functions. With that, on our campus, we have a little over 11,000 students, but we have about 16.4% students that are international. So that's a big chunk of the students who are right there on campus. So we had to address that. We also had to address the fact that our population of students on campus, we had to practice social distancing. How do you maintain the dorms or the dining? And you have to make sure that students are appropriately social distancing. We also had to, make sure that our communication was key. A lot of times when you hear a lot of the briefings, you don't dig deep into some of these specific industries. I hear what's happening in the educational systems because we do a lot of work with Newark Public Schools. We've been on calls with them to hear about some of their challenges, whether it's their meetings or teaching or students who are participating or not participating. And I can say that NJIT had a little bit of pre-planning, so to speak, that we were able to transition into that. But by transitioning into that, it didn't mean it was perfect. It just means that we were able to, week one, we did surveys of both students and faculty so that we have real-time data and information. So it was very important to us to understand what exactly can we do to help during this particular pandemic, because this is not just a fire drill that we practice every day of going online. This is not just digital learning. This is a new form of engagement. It's a new form of participation, and it's a new experience for so many individuals, not just working from home, but also teaching and learning from home as a higher education institution. So we, about a month after our initial I guess, engagements. We actually convened on April 15th. We had a community forum that the president of NJIT, Joe Bloom, and our provost, Fadi Deek, held a community gathering for anyone to dial in. It was very effective. They really impressed upon safety, health, welfare of all of our NJIT community, but making sure that we prioritize what are the challenges. If students are struggling, whether it's with taking a class, because we were 3/4 way through the semester, but there's still that remote learning that has to be done through the end of the year. We had to really think about how do we adjust some of our grading policies. So we've been very intentional. We've been very, very supportive of our entire community, because at the end of the day, we are still in operation, but we want to make sure that the students, according to their guidelines in their different respective departments, are able to successfully get their NJIT degree. I just wanted to also highlight a couple other things that, although a lot of folks typically have a lot of time in higher education to prepare and be ready, the 2-week transition was something that, again, we could have never anticipated or expected. But given all that we've been able to achieve, we've been stable. However, what's not stable, and this is happening all across this country, all across our state, all across these municipalities and districts, the financial challenges. The financial challenges for a university, for example, NJIT, our fiscal year for 2020, it's from July 2019 and it goes straight to June 30th, 2020. So given that we had to provide stipends back or vouchers for our students, we are giving back for housing if students aren't there, or their meal plans, or parking. If a student is graduating, then we're able to, do a rebate. But if it's a student that's going to be there, we're giving them an opportunity to be able to come back. So these are some of the challenges we have to think about. We have to also think about, when we hear from the leadership of our governor, Phil Murphy, the challenges that are happening every day. We hear them, but we also understand that as an institution, as a university, a part of so many that make up so many aspects of not just higher education, but we deal with travel, we deal with flying, we deal with conferences, we deal with students who are international, as I mentioned earlier. So we have to really think about how it impacts these students who also come to campus, who now their parents may be furloughed or unemployed, who might not traditionally have had to apply for FAFSA, but now these students have to consider FAFSA. On the federal level, we also have been, we've been as a team staying very closely to what's coming down the pipeline with resources coming back to the students. That's been extremely important. There's been some guidelines with the CARES Act so that students get direct aid. I believe it is about $4 million that's going directly to students, not for the university, but to students, which is wonderful, which is key, which we highly support and endorse. So again, we have to stay on top of not just what's happening to our university campus community, but think about all of our pre-college programs. We have over 4,000 students that we touch every single year. So how do we make sure that we support these public schools, these charter schools, these private schools during a time that all of our educational pipeline is impacted? And then finally, I just wanted to share a little bit of a uplifting note that we have some incredible community members at NJIT. We've been working with the county OEM. We've been working with our local city. We've been abiding by not just the mandates coming out of local or county or ultimately from the governor's executive orders, but we've been really providing support through PPE, through just whether it's bodies or individuals to help support in our makerspace, being on numerous calls to try to think about our manufacturing challenges that have existed within the state. But again, as a polytech or STEM institution, we really are in a city that is going to be impacted like numbers that we've never seen since 2008 when it was the Great Recession. And that took, 10 years to rebound. So as a university, we are poised to be a community partner, as we always are, to really civically engage our partners, our stakeholders, our community, our faculty, our staff, so that we can, again, really create what is the next step, because we are all in the middle of this pandemic, but we really want to be a resource, but also be a partner as we think about what happens in 2 months from now, 3 months from now. Big picture for our university, although we are fully operable, we are going to remain remote learning through the summer. We will reevaluate what our plans are for the fall, keeping in close contact with numerous institutions that are similar to ours, and also abiding by what's in the best interest in the safety, the health, and the welfare of our community. So I really look forward to any questions that any folks might have, but I wanted to give a big picture of what an institution looks like during these times, some of the challenges that we've had to endure or face, but ultimately how we are all in this together, and that there are many parents who work at NJIT who had to go and pick up their children from another higher education institution, whether in the state or outside the state. So this does not just impact what's happening on our campus, but it truly is a connection that we all are facing and impacted by, and we really need to abide by the social distancing and the leadership that we are very fortunate to have under my president, Joe Bloom, under our mayor, Raz Baraka in the city of Newark, but also under our governor, Phil Murphy. I think that we have to also understand there's a lot of information that's coming down quickly. Also very stay close to our senators, right? So this piece with higher education, it's not just about what's happening, but we think about where's the funding coming from, not just what's impacting our communities locally, but how is this impacting higher education and the funding that historically we would be able to receive, but are going to be drastically cut by millions and millions of dollars. So I definitely value and appreciate the challenges that are happening from all around the state, because I hear the challenges. Where are we going to get and sustain our economy? Because the economic impact of this is huge. So I hope that that small update was helpful to everyone, and I am now available for any questions. And again, I would like to thank everyone for convening this call, because I think these issues, we don't get to drill down on each industry all the time, but hearing education from that pre-K through 16 perspective is truly, truly important, because it does help our economy, and it helps really prepare the future workforce that is very challenged and strained today. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Angela. Thanks so much for all of that really important and helpful information. So I'll turn it over to Casey to moderate, but if we've got a couple of questions, Angela, before we...
Yeah, thank you. So again, if you have a question, you want to either pop it into the chat box or raise your hand. If you're on the phone and you hit *6 to unmute, you can ask a question from the phone. And while we're waiting to see if there's any questions that come in, I just want to drop a link into the chat box right now about a particular program of NJIT honor scholars who produced hundreds of personal protective equipment face masks for local hospitals in Newark and the region. So, you know, as you mentioned, Angela, being an NJIT, you know, STEAM education platform, and being connected to the community and being of use and of support to the local community, you know, that's just sort of a prime example, as we've been hearing sort of pop up in different places in our state and around the country as well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. We're certainly grateful for your students.
There's also an NJIT COVID link that you'll also share, if you don't mind, that has all of the information, some that I've shared, in addition to other resources that we do have available, including PPE or other resources that can be provided.
Great. Oh, I see a question from Ira. So Ira, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Okay, good morning. Angela, I wanted to ask you about what you're doing for those programs that are more on the hands-on side of the education. We do an after-school program in the world of aviation, and a lot of what we do with our students is hands-on. And obviously, with us not being able to get together with the students, them having the supplies, etc., we're kind of at a disadvantage. And I was wondering what NJIT has done in that respect for their students who chemistry, physics, many of the technology fields, mechanical engineering, so on and so forth.
I would love to connect you with some of our folks in our academic side of the world, but we have been able to continue to hold a number of sessions with the faculty, with the students, but specifically so that I can get you with some of the faculty members, if you drop me an email at angela@njit.edu, and we can share the feedback we receive, because there's folks who are directly in the thick of those educational pieces, but my email is angela@njit.edu, and I'll make sure that we connect you, because it is all about information sharing at this point. How do we achieve this kind of hands-on work, as you mentioned? So I know it is going on with very limited, but I'd rather get my academic side of the house to be able to give you some proper best practices, if we may, and hopefully connect you with that if that works for you.
That sounds fine, thank you. And just on the previous conversation, talking with our teachers who we're working with, they're seeing that same type of drop-off in the number of students who are attending the online classes. Thanks.
Thanks, Ira. Appreciate that question. At the moment, I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Are there anyone who's on the phone who has a question that they'd like to ask? If not, then we'll move on to our final speaker of the day. *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, hearing none at the moment. Elizabeth, turning it back to you.
Great, thanks, Casey. Thanks again, Angela. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce our third guest speaker for this morning. It's Patrick Wall. Patrick is the senior reporter for Chalkbeat. He covers Newark, and we're really grateful to have you with us here this morning, Patrick. So if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself, and I know everybody joins me in welcoming you to this morning's briefing.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, and thanks everybody who joined the call today. This has been so fascinating to hear from John and Angela. And so I'll give you some perspective. Chalkbeat, we cover education in different cities and states, and Chalkbeat Newark has been around for the past 2 years, covering Newark specifically, but also some statewide issues. And I have been talking to a lot of teachers, parents, students over the past month about what the pandemic has meant for them. And so I'll give you some kind of on the ground insight into what that looks like here, but I imagine that a lot of the issues that we're finding here are playing out in similar ways across the state. Obviously, each district has different resources, different needs, but more than ever before, I think all districts are facing very similar challenges at the same time. And so I think a lot of the things that I'm talking about are probably playing out elsewhere. So the first one is just very basic issue is school food, which is meals. As you know, children get at least one meal a lot, get 2, breakfast and lunch, and some even get suppers and after school snacks at schools every day. And so right away with this unprecedented pandemic and schools shut down with really very little warning, that schools had to pivot immediately into finding out how they could continue to provide meals. And so in Newark, the vast majority of students qualify for subsidized meals here. Each day, about 19,000 students. There's about 36,000, but each day about 19,000 students would get breakfast, 21,000 would get lunch. So big number. Right away, the district started to distribute grab-and-go meals, so families could come, pick up a breakfast and lunch, and take it home. But what I have started to hear about, and actually we're going to report on this today, so you can check back our website later, but we have heard that there's issues just getting those meals to families and having them come and pick it up. And the number that I heard is that the district has only been able to give out about 2,000 meals per day. And again, there were 21,000 students just getting lunch each day, 19,000. So that's like 40,000 meals in a normal day. Now it's down to 2,000. And so that is kind of alarming from folks that I've spoken to. By contrast, Patterson, which is similar size and demographics, but a little bit smaller, it's given out 208,000 meals in about 5 weeks since schools have closed. Newark has been 100,000, so about half as many. meals during that time. And so I think there's real questions about what's the best way that districts can get food out to students. Is it helping deliver? Some places have used school buses or other staffers if families can't get out of the home. Some districts are starting to reduce the number of days that families have to come in so they can get multiple days worth of meals at once, so that it kind of reduces the exposure and allows for more social distancing and things like that. So anyways, that is just kind of a challenge that I think people might not even think about, but I think we're encountering here. And then obviously the big one is remote learning, what that looks like. And I think a lot of people, maybe not parents who are actually going through this or teachers, but maybe people who don't have kids might hear remote learning and think like online classes and kind of high-tech digital learning, but that's definitely not what's happening on the ground in a lot of places. Again, this was a really rapid shift that had to happen. Schools did not have online courses set up ready to go immediately. And so in Newark, the district was ahead of the curve in that it had paper packets ready to go from the day schools shut down in March 16th. And so those were produced. It was 2 weeks worth of work, which is what the state was expecting at the time, was that schools would have to close for 2 weeks. So they were ready to go with those packets. And partly that was because they knew that not every family has technology, either internet or computers at home. So to be safe, they had these paper packets. But as the shutdown has gone on, now it's indefinite. The state is saying until May 15th, but it seems very likely it's going to go longer than that, and probably very possible the whole academic year. Now districts are starting to think, okay, how can we continue learning and do a little more interactive learning? And so in Newark, it's first they had to address that digital divide, the fact that a lot of families did not have technology. There was an analysis based on census data that about 1 in 3 Newark households didn't have any internet at their homes, and about a fifth of households didn't have a smartphone or a computer. And so there was a big gap in technology here. And so schools did have Chromebooks, the kind of inexpensive laptops. So a lot started loaning those out. Parents were coming to the schools, teachers were volunteering and handing those out. But as of the beginning of this month, when the district was saying it was going more virtual, there were still about 2,000 families that didn't have any sort of computer at home. And then what we're hearing, and Maureen had kind of mentioned this earlier, we're hearing that families that thought they might be okay with the computer they had are realizing that with multiple kids trying to use it, that's not going to work. That if they were getting free or reduced price internet that some of these providers are offering, that actually the bandwidth is not enough to have multiple kids and potentially a parent on at the same time. So all these kind of tech issues that you don't realize at first. Some kids were using their parents' cell phones to do Zoom meetings, which is okay a few times, but again, that gets hard. And so I think the tech issues have come up just with the devices. And then there's the tech savviness, that just how to use these online tools. This was new to everybody in a lot of cases. A lot of teachers had a Zoom meeting before. They didn't have a need to, because you're in the building every day. And so that has been new. A lot have used Google Classroom before, but not to a heavy extent. And what I heard, for example, is that the first week teachers were on the phone day to night, phone or email or text or these different apps, telling parents like literally just how to log into Google Classroom, what the access codes are, troubleshooting, doing tech support in a way that they're certainly not used to for families, just logging on. And then when some teachers have tried to do Zoom meetings, they've had mixed results. Some teachers have said that students have logged on and that it's been okay. Again, they've had to do some sort of makeshift things with students using cell phones in some cases, but others had really low turnout. I heard high school students saying like the first Zoom classes, there was like 2 other students on the call with them. And so that has been an issue, just how to use this technology. And then I think something that also kind of just gets overlooked is that virtual learning, so, again, these aren't full online classes. This is kind of scattered what teachers are able to do. But even if they're doing Zoom classes, trying to interact with students online, it just doesn't compare to a classroom. what I hear from students is that, it's just not, you're not able to ask a teacher a question and get immediate feedback. You're not able to work with your peers, just all the kind of things that they rely on. And then on top of that, there's just a lot of stress about working from home. I think, a lot of us know that, but for students, this is really new to them. They don't have their friends around. They don't have their athletic, activities, clubs, things like that. One student, a quote that I had that just stood out to me, he was saying his entire sleep schedule has been messed up. He's he's doing his work every night and sleeping in until 1 in the afternoon, just because he just doesn't have a sense, like a lot of us, like what day it is, what time it is. He said, I'm overstressed, my anxiety is building up. I see the same beige walls all throughout the day. And so I think that kind of mental, social emotional issue is really gonna pop up. And that's on top of them, a lot of students worrying about their parents who are essential workers, going out still, potentially being exposed, having to care for their younger siblings. So I think that's also a really big issue. And then just quickly here, another huge challenge I think is going to be attendance. One is like, how do you track it remotely? What counts? Some schools are doing different things. Is it going on to Google Classroom and typing present, which some schools are doing? Is it turning in an assignment? Some parents who don't have computers are having to text photos of the work that students are doing on paper. So it's a really scattered way, and the district at this point has said they can't calculate what overall attendance has been. So they really don't have, at least from what they're telling me, a clear picture of how many kids are engaging. I think that's going to be worrisome, because that means they don't know how many students are potentially falling behind. And then just to give you a picture really quickly of what some of the obstacles teachers are hearing. I spoke with one teacher. She's a high school teacher here at a pretty high needs school in the South Ward. She called the other day to check in with her students. She called like 94 students over a period of hours. Each one called their family. One, the student had just lost her father to COVID-19. As you know, Newark has been really hard hit, more than some other places. So had students dealing with the illness. She also talked to families still did not have internet or phone or laptops. And then she still has not been able to reach about 6 students since schools closed, so more than a month. And the quote that I have from her is that, I can't find them. I was thinking about going to their houses, but I can't because it's too dangerous. And I'm wondering, where are you? And so I think, that's maybe an extreme example, but I've definitely hearing similar things from other teachers, that it's really hard to reach students. Their phones might be disconnected, their parents are working. And so just keeping in touch with students, you can't do house calls in the same way you could. I think that's going to continue to be a big problem. So I'll stop there. There's definitely more challenges, also more wonderful work that teachers, that educators, social workers, the district is doing in this really unprecedented time. So I don't want to make it sound like it's all challenges. They are really doing an incredible effort at this, without really any preparation. But that said, I think that the longer this goes on, the more these challenges are going to arise. And I think the further behind a lot of students are going to be whenever schools reopen.
Thank you, Patrick. Really so appreciative for all of that information and that overview and, highly detailed sharing of what you're learning. So I know we've got a couple of minutes here. Does anyone have a question for Patrick? I feel like we could probably do several education calls over the next couple of months to drill down deeper into this work. But Casey, I'll turn it to you.
Great. Yes, we do have a question in the chat box. Patrick, why do you think there are so few students accessing the free meals? Do you have any idea on that?
No, it is kind of a puzzle. And the theories that I've heard, one is just understandably parents could be fearful of just coming out of their houses right now. Another is that there are, I think on the bright side, there's a lot of other meal resources that are being provided. Food pantries are stepping up. We've talked to some school, like social workers and parent liaisons who are actually doing food distributions at local churches. And so it could be parents are getting other sources, but it is kind of a mystery. I know one issue I think the district might think about is that they are doing everyday distribution rather than letting parents stock up on meals. And so that might be something that they could consider doing that might help get more people to come.
Great, thank you for that. we'll see if there's any more questions that are coming in. Jamie Angelini put in a mental health resource in the chat box. That'll obviously show up in our summary as well, but if anyone knows people who need to access that now, please feel free to share that information. We do have another question, another couple of questions. One is, have schools tried creating family teams to keep tabs and encourage each other? And, we'll throw this to you, Patrick, but also, to John or to Angela, anyone who might have more information on this. And so again, the question is, have schools tried creating family teams to keep tabs and encourage each other? So I'm not sure, Debbie, does that mean like teams between multiple families, or do you want to talk a little bit about that?
It just occurred to me because of the problems with reaching students, the lack of access to resources, et cetera. But just for a teacher to have to call 94 kids, is overwhelming. Whereas if it occurs to me that if we could create sort of kids who know each other groups that could actually connect during the week about an assignment, something like that kind of keeps going to combat some of the isolation that people feel and the frustration. I'm sure a lot of parents are just like, I don't know how to do this,
Yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing this.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I definitely have heard kind of anecdotally that parents are helping one another. Teachers are clearly working overtime. I mean, that's something that I've been really amazed by, is that teachers, a lot of them who have their own kids at home, that they're also having to homeschool, are working as long as hours as anyone. I mean, some are working until, they told me, 8, 10 at night, answering phone calls and emails and things. And then I have heard there is an attendance counselor who was getting his basketball players at his school to call or go on Instagram and things to reach students that he couldn't. And so I do see kind of resourceful ways of using students' networks like that to try to reach kids who have been out of touch.
Yeah, I hear similarly, and it's anecdotal with individual principals who reach out to families to try to find other families, those kinds of things. I don't think it's widespread, but I think you see it in individual schools and in some cases some districts, but it's taking a lot of individual ingenuity that it's hardly systemic, that's for sure.
Great, thanks John, thanks Patrick. I'm not currently seeing any more questions in right now. One shared comment about the lunches and why students may not be taking advantage of them in our chat box is that sometimes the quality of the food itself isn't necessarily what students are looking for, but also access to food closer to home is really the easiest way for families to get food. So this individual also says that families will often just go to food pantries because it's closer, and maybe there's more options as well, I'm not sure. But without any other questions at the moment, Elizabeth, I'm going to turn this back over to you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, John Mooney, Angela Garretson, Patrick Wall. All of us, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your information with us today. It's extremely helpful. Thanks to everybody who's participated today. Thanks for your questions and your comments. So many of you who we've gotten to work with over the years at Creative New Jersey are the connectors and influencers in your own communities. So if you learned information today that you feel is really helpful for your networks to know, I ask you to please share that. As Casey's mentioned, all of the links that you see in the chat box and some other notes and information that our speaker shared with us today are going to be put into a summary report. We're going to send that out to all of you in the next couple of days. You can see summary reports from all of our other calls on the website. So, we've heard some great feedback on these reports, that they're really helpful, and they're sort of chock full of all different kinds of information. So we hope that you will share that out with your networks and communities.
Thank you to Creative New Jersey too, by the way, for hosting this.
Thank you, John.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. And for those of you who want to join our future calls, I'm dropping the new registration link into the chat box right now. You can also access it on the homepage of Creative New Jersey's website, which is creativenj.org. As I said, we'll be doing these calls through May, and we've got a variety of topics, including accessibility, mental health, food security, possibly also addressing seniors, and maybe reconsidering how we need to think about urban living as a possible topic as well. So sorry to cut in there, Elizabeth. I just wanted to grab that in before our folks started.
Absolutely. So next week, our
moving
call
on.
will focus on mental health. Hi, Kim. We're seeing our friend and co-chair of our Newark host team, Kim Gaddy, who just launched her camera. Next week is going to be focused on mental health, right? So we have Bob Clay from the Mental Health Association of New Jersey, and we're hoping to have somebody else from maybe the State Department join us as well. So stay tuned for some more information about that, but you'll see that. Jeanette, do you want to say hello? We know we're a few minutes over, but we want our other team member, Jeanette Mitchell, to be able to say
hi. Hi guys, everybody. I've already actually just posted all of our links for our social media pages. So just, link and connect with us. And of course, thank you for being on the call.
Great, thanks, Jeanette. So thanks again, everyone. We'll stay in touch with you. If you have other information that you feel we should be pushing out to our statewide community, please share that with us. We've asked you guys multiple times, to tell us also the good things that are happening. John mentioned some of those things earlier. So, it's a difficult situation, but we know that there are, innovative and positive things that are happening all around the state. We want to help to shine a spotlight on that. We all need encouragement. We want to stay together. We want to support each other. We'll get through it, and hopefully we'll all do not only our best, but what is really vitally necessary for us to take care of everybody in our state, right? We want to do our best, but we want to make sure we are succeeding at doing the most important work. So let's help each other to do that. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you.
For anyone who wants to stay on or has other conversations or questions or resources that they want to share, we'll be on for the next few minutes after the call, so feel free to do that. But otherwise, look out for all the information coming on the website with the summary, and our next call is coming up. I'm going to stop the recording at this point. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.